Hi, this is Ashishar Bidekar and welcome to my podcast, The ARB Show. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Darren. Darren has over 20 years experience as a board member, CEO, CISO, and SaaS product innovator. He offers unparalleled expertise in business leadership, InfoSec, and data privacy. He is certified in CIPM, CIPT, fluent in English, French, Spanish, and has helped numerous SMBs reduce risk and comply with SOC 2, ISO 2701, NIST, HIPAA, and other regulations. Darren's unique skills make him an invaluable asset in cybersecurity and data privacy. Darren is a co-founder and CEO of Carbide, which makes enterprise-class security and privacy accessible to fast-growing companies. Welcome to the show, Darren. Look forward to hearing your views on top 5 trends in cybersecurity. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Great to be here, and I'm glad we're having this conversation today.
Great, Darren. Maybe you can just give a quick intro about your background in case I've missed out everything, and then let's dive into the trends.
Cool. So you covered a little bit there. My name's Darren Gallop. I'm based out of Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia in Canada. Started my career in the music industry and moved over into music and then events technology, which led me down the path of cybersecurity. And then I built a cybersecurity company, which is the company that I'm currently CEO and co-founder of right now, which is called Carbide. Basically, we help SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises, build, design, deploy, track their cybersecurity program. We also work with fractional CISOs and other cybersecurity professionals and helping them build their practice and giving them toolage and playbooks and ways to create efficiency in their business. So fascinating world. And actually, my latest thing that I can add, when I started getting really into cybersecurity, I guess a little over 10 years now. Once I got a handful of years of experience under my belt, I joined the ISC2. I'm sure you're familiar with ISC2, and I became I studied for and wrote the dreaded CISSP exam. And fascinatingly, I actually just got elected to the board of directors for the ISC2. So I will be on the board at the international level of the organization for the 3-year period starting January 1, 2025. So that was actually just announced earlier this week. So really excited about that opportunity. Really brings sort of my two worlds, I guess 3 worlds together. We talk about leadership and board member sort of participation there, and cybersecurity, which has been my career for I guess the last 10 years or so.
Fantastic. So let's dive straight into it. So what are your top 5 trends which you see in the cybersecurity space?
Yeah, so I think a lot of I think about these, and we wrote every year. I've written this article, right, where we for my marketing team, my business, to launch the trends. And a lot of the trends that we see are sort of continuations of the trends we've seen historically, right? So the first trend that I think is just continuous, and I don't see an end in sight in this, is just the increase in activity in terms of criminal activity. And I would say where it's almost a hyper increase now, because it's very organized. We're seeing sophisticated organized criminal groups specialize in hacking for money, and it's actually in a lot of organizations and in a lot of criminal groups replacing other illicit activities that have traditionally been their sort of primary product or primary revenue activity. So when you compare, for example, cybercrime to, say, producing and transporting and selling cocaine, which has been, illicit drugs have been a classic in the organized criminal entrepreneurial world. There's so much risk around that. I mean, there's risks. You're growing plants. You have risks of competition. You have warfare risks. You have law enforcement. You've got to produce these materials. You have a lot of people involved. So there's a lot of trust required. Just a very complex business. Seeing how it's completely illegal, and you're trying to sneak this in. You've got to get these drugs over borders, and dogs can smell them, and there's all this. It's a very hard as you can imagine, if you go watch something like the narco shows, right? You see the degree of risk, and people are dying everywhere and stuff. So you compare cybercrime to that, it sounds pretty laid back. I mean, if somebody put a gun to my head and said you have got to be a criminal and here's your options, I'm sure I would pick cybercrime, because I don't think I would do that well smuggling cocaine over borders. I don't think I'd be able to keep that face. But I just think it is a very it makes a lot of sense logically if you sort of try to put your mind in the criminal's mind. It's a very logical thing, and certainly the trends explosive in terms of how many cyber criminal groups are growing through cyber crime as a primary source of revenue. So that's not going to slow down. That's a big one, and that's been a big one for several years.
Right.
The others, go ahead. Sorry, if you have any comments on that.
So I was just thinking, the classical email scam of some prince in an exotic country trying to give his, $5 million or $10 million. All you just need to do is click a link, right? So from that to that continues, you still get those things. But I think what you're saying makes great economic sense. And so, for example, right now we hear about, phishing. We hear about AI cloned voices. Right. I think there was some, a news item wherein a CFO of a big company was really scammed in a big way, because he got invited to a meeting where he had all his colleagues apparently, and then there was someone who said, okay, we need this approval, etc., and then he gave that approval. It was all a fake meeting. Everything was set up with AI, and then $10 million or more thing. So it's really really kind of advanced. But just on that same point, when you talk of the kind of increase in cybersecurity, cyber crimes or so, do you also see an increased kind of law enforcement catching up with these crooks and kind of act as a deterrent for people not to go into this area?
I would say so. So increase in activity and spend and investment, absolutely. Do I think it'll have much impact? I don't. And if we can use history as a predictive tool to tell us what the future looks like, let's go back and look at the war on drugs. Great example. How many billions of dollars have been invested to stop the drug trade, illicit drug trade, which, at the time, there was focus. If you think back of the Ronald Reagan era, this is your brain on drugs, that put the egg in the frying pan. And I think at that point there was a high focus on cannabis, which is now, in Canada entirely legal on the federal level, and in the US is, kind of a spotty legalization by state. But all these go back to this idea. So we have law enforcement and government. You're putting laws in place. You're putting budget for law enforcement. They're going out there and to catch people. But if you go, there was no point in time in North America where you could not go onto a street in any major city and buy cocaine, hash, heroin, marijuana, whatever you want. So billions of dollars of taxpayer money being spent to stop the war, for this war on drugs. There's always drugs. There's always been drugs. If I wanted to get cocaine today, sure, I could drive downtown and start, finding some folks on the street that maybe look like they're into the alternative commerce industry, and I'm sure I could find myself a bag of cocaine pretty easily, even though it's illegal, even though there's tons of money invested in it. So, and that is going back to what I was saying before about how drugs are, not as intelligent or much more risky. So these are drugs. These are physical material that needs to travel over borders, that's produced in other countries. There are mechanisms that can detect these physically, whether it's types of scanners that can scan, for mass things in baggage and luggage in humans, dogs that can sniff the soap. Yet you can still buy drugs in pretty much. I've never been to a city. I can't imagine where there's not drugs. So how effective, if the goal is to take away the access to drugs to people, and protect people from drugs. I mean, walk around the streets in most cities in Canada right now. There's a homeless crisis. A lot of that's driven by mental health issues, and there's a lot of drug use. And so failure, billions of dollars invested. something that we could all say should be easier to discover than packets of data and communication in a massive sea of so much data just blasting through in this borderless universe right now. How the hell are they going to have a chance? Like, so, you know, what did the war on drugs do? It created a higher price point. So why is cocaine expensive? Because the risks are so high. So the only difference, if you took the war away on drugs, you say, you know, I don't care, we give up, do what you want. Just be more affordable to purchase the cocaine, but you still have cocaine. So, you know, come back to our question on cybercrime. I don't see how it's possible. And you know, I think like criminal groups have less red tape in politics. They can make changes quickly. They don't need lines of authority. They don't need to appease all of these different, you know, personalities and roles and entities. They can just move quickly, right? So yeah, you're gonna, you know, they're gonna catch criminals. It's gonna deter some people, but in organized crime, in the world of organized crime, when somebody gets busted, so you go into a town, there's 3 drug dealers. If one drug dealer gets busted, that's an opportunity for the other 2 drug dealers that didn't get busted. So I don't see how there's even I don't even see how you could imagine it really keeping up with it.
Got it. So let's move to the other trends that you have for us.
All right. Trend 2, so it will be the hyper-algorithmic toolage that hackers of all levels are being equipped with. And this has been going on for a while. You know, a couple of years ago, I think we did a prediction on, we were talking about RAS, ransomware as a service, right? So that was like, you know, some of the earlier days of tools that, you know, you go on the dark web, you can find this tool, you can go in, you get, it's just like signing up for a LinkedIn Sales Navigator account or something like that, like totally gooey. You don't have to be a software developer. You don't have to have any, you know, immense technical capacity here to do this. You just go in, operate it through a GUI, you pay in Bitcoin or something like that, and you know there's training videos, and maybe they even give you some leads to get started. You can build your ransomware, you can get some strategic advice, you can build your campaigns and run them similar to how an SDR, sales development rep, would run a sales campaign. So, you know, we saw that happening over the last couple of years, where artificial intelligence and more specifically large language models really empower that is, you know, you made the example earlier, like, you know, the fact that we can do deep fakes, like there's tools that are accessible to everyday people without any special technical skills, where I could take a sample of your voice and with your accent and the way you speak, and I could talk into that microphone after this podcast, and that would be like, it would sound like you, and I'd pronounce the words like you, and I'd use so like this technology is so accessible to everybody. So, you know, absolutely 100% that bolts on to my first prediction, which is the organized criminal groups, which are out there recruiting people and diverting more resources towards cybercrime versus alternative traditional black market industries. But now they're hyper empowering that with artificial intelligence toolage. So gone are the days of, you remember these emails where it's like, okay, clearly this guy named John Smith is not an Anglophone. Like, look at the way he's writing. This is not quality English, but that's fine. Like, if I wanted to write a phishing attack email to a company in India, even though I don't speak any Punjab or anything, I could go and I could get ChatGPT to write a perfect email for me that I could send to somebody and they wouldn't know the difference, right? I could even do the video, and I actually did this. I was as part of my election campaign for ISC2, I was doing videos because I speak Spanish and French. So I did a couple of videos in French and Spanish. And at some point I saw something that was like, oh, you know, convert your videos to other languages. I was like, no way, right? This is hilarious. I'm going to try it. So I uploaded my English video, and it converted in about 20 minutes into a video of me, from me speaking in English, speaking a perfect Castellano, like Spain Spanish. I was like, wow. And like even the lip movement and everything, like it was, you would not know it wasn't real unless you knew how I actually speak Spanish, which is with an English accent and, you know, some grammar mistakes and things like that. So yeah, I mean, this means that both the organized groups have this toolage, but that also gives the ability for individuals, so just lone operators that want to go out and make a buck, that they can have the impact and reach of larger groups. So you see this, it's very similar to what you see in sales development reps, right? Used to be you'd have like a bunch of people dialing for dollars and a bunch of people sending emails. Well, the tools came about that you could automate. You could have a robo dialer dialing and you're just picking up the calls that are interested in communicating, and you can have tools sending out mass emails and AI responding. So one SDR, we look at in above ground business, one sales development rep can do about as much as 4 to 6 sales development reps 2 years ago. Well, the same exact technology concepts are applying themselves in this lone hacker world. So one lone hacker with the right tools and the right strategic plan can be as effective as 8 or 10. So bring that into economies of disparate economies, and you think about what if you live in a place where it's really hard to make any more than $15 or $20 a day. Well, and you got a little bit of skills and strategy, and you're not, you're considering going to the dark side. Your ability to make large amounts of money in just using the tool. So all that accumulates. You've got the prediction 1, organized crime growth. Prediction 2, people using tools. So that 1 plus 2 is just a massive, a massive increase. And at the same time, we see the disparity globally between the richest people in the world and the poorest people in the world continue to increase. So that plays a really big part on that as well.
Got it. So yeah, I mean, these are economics at play, and the internet is a leveling field, right? So anyone can have a global business if it's purely based on internet, and same is by the dark side. Remember, it kind of draws the parallel between Star Wars, right? People going from the light side to the dark side, right? So,
yeah, man.
Yeah, that's true. So what are the other observations you have for cybersecurity? What are the things which you're seeing?
So, again, this is a continuation of what we've seen happening in the last couple of years. So I think when I got into cybersecurity back in, I guess, somewhere around 2010, we were focused on cybersecurity, CIA triad, right? So confidentiality, integrity, availability. And then when GDPR came out, it was like, I've never seen a law get so much global press and fear mongering. And all of a sudden, I think that was a transition point where it was a very clear and loud involvement from government to create regulations to protect individuals. And it's a combination, right? Privacy regulations are not simply designed to protect individuals from malicious hackers, although that is certainly part of what their objective is. It's also designed to protect themselves from corporations that are just completely focused on growth at all costs, with no respect to people's privacy and people's rights to their data. So but what that has created, and I felt it in my last job. So my last company, we had implemented SOC 2. We did a SOC 2 reports. We implemented controls to prepare for our SOC 2. We implemented the ISO 27001 2013 standard in the business. But then in that last little bit of time before I sold that business, the focus moved all over to privacy. And so obviously all the work we did in cybersecurity was helpful to get to become compliant with privacy. But where I've really seen in the last couple of years, we're seeing that trend of privacy regulations and cybersecurity regulations, and a lot of overlap, because obviously cybersecurity is a big component of data privacy. And we've seen the GDPR was the big loud one, but we've since seen Brazil adopt a privacy regulation that's similar in spirit to GDPR. We've seen other Latin American countries follow suit. There's a big talk in the U.S. around data privacy regulation on a federal level, though that's may or may not happen. We've also seen states taking the lead, with this lack of a federal privacy regulation to protect people outside of certain industry specific regulations. There's a little more than 10 states right now that I believe have active privacy regulations in the U.S. It's a very rapidly changing space. Canada is doing work and has done work to upgrade PIPEDA, which is our federal privacy regulation, and we've seen provinces introduce new legislation around data privacy. So This is really where this really affects cybersecurity is I think it used to be there's a data security office and there's a data privacy office, and now they just have to work so closely together because privacy is becoming paramount. So, in the work we do with SMBs, I would say the majority of our companies are coming to us with data privacy requirements as the reason they're implementing cybersecurity. So that really forced, that's kind of how I got into doing the CIPM a few years ago through the International Association of Privacy Professionals, and then more recently the CIPT, because it's just we've integrated it, and that's how we work with SMBs. It's like, if you're gonna work at cybersecurity, you're in a business context, the likelihood that you're going to be working with PII, person identifiable information, is extremely high. And so, to be in that field without having, at least the management or the technology, depending on your role, knowledge of data privacy. So that's going to be a trend for practitioners to really up their game on data privacy, because that's really going to be the focus. And then, I think the challenge that creates in a security program, as security people, we're always screaming for budget constantly from senior management, from the board, from the CEO. What we're seeing, I think there's a positive side of regulation, which is the organizations that maybe don't think they have to worry about this yet kind of get forced into, and of course that spirals down the supply chain. So even smaller businesses get, these security addendums and privacy addendums with strict requirements. But the downside of that, and this is due to the complexity of so many regulations, is we see small security teams and small or medium-sized businesses that have, business might only be $10 million in revenue or less. And because they're operating in the States, they might be operating in all the states. They might have some enterprise customers that are working in South America, enterprise customers in overseas, and within the European Union there. And so you have this small security team, and really the biggest fear that the general counsel and the CEO is bringing down is we need to comply with like 17 different data privacy regulations. So you see a lot of the energy, unfortunately, getting pulled away from traditional risk management and security principles, where you put the majority of your investment and time on the areas where the greatest risk. And you get all this, there's a lot of distraction, a lot of spend trying to get help navigating this red tape environment that's being created by the lack of consolidation of laws. So I think this is a trend that for anybody working in the field, they have to figure out how they're going to manage, because at the end of the day, you still have to focus on your risk-based approach. And at the same time, now you may have to, in your small business with a very small underfunded team, try to figure out how you're going to the best of your ability, comply with maybe a dozen different regulations.
Got it. So that's really great. Any other trend which you see, or which you would like to bring up?
Yeah. So I think the other trend that I'm seeing, and I think this is a positive trend, I'm seeing it in business, is that security always used to be an afterthought, right? Nobody starts a business like, okay, most important thing, let's ensure that we're complying with security standards, and we're managing that. That's not how innovation generally and historically traditionally happened. Innovators and thought leaders are looking at a problem that they have some involvement in depth and expertise in, and they're generally passionately trying to solve that problem. And the biggest risk when you're starting a business is not that you're going to get hacked. It's not that you're going to get fined for a GDPR violation. It's that you're just not going to be able to do this, right? You're not going to be able to solve the problem. And then when you finally start having a thesis and you raise money, then you have this new risk, which is, okay, now we have 12 or 18 months of runway. So now your biggest risk is, we're going to run out of money. Right. And so you get to that point, then you're going to try to get enough validation in the next 6 to 8 months that you can start raising again, so you can put more money in the bank before, as you're approaching 6 months before you're running out of money. And so this roller coaster in entrepreneurship, certainly in highly innovative fields where you're going out and raising venture capital and playing this runway game, it becomes an afterthought. So what happens is, we see this common, and I've experienced this in my last startup, is that you spend 5 or 6 years in this. For us, I think we were 5 years in my last company. We probably had, somewhere close to $1 million in revenue. We had closed, we'd closed our seed funding, and we started landing gigs with really big events. We were in the festival event space, so we had a platform. We signed Coachella, and that was, obviously a big, that really put us on the map. And then so we started getting, other business from AEG Live and from Live Nation events, things like Bonnaroo, things like that. We attracted Disney events like X Games, and so these organizations now, as we graduated from the smaller events to the large corporate events, they had cyber due diligence teams that assessed vendors based on risk. And that we learned the hard way that, oh no, we've made so many crappy decisions over 5 years because we never thought of security or privacy, and now it's a bolt-on. So that's security. Security practitioners have been traditionally, especially going into SMEs, have been going in, it's like a disaster in a lot of cases, or it's like ground zero, or it's completely ad hoc, and security wasn't part of that foundational thought process, and we're going in there and we're remediating, right? So there's been a lot of demand for these people that can go in as an advisor and remediate, do an assessment, figure out where the strengths and weaknesses is, come and build policies, governance, risk program, start that education process. What I'm seeing now, and I think this is really positive, and certainly will help our small business community be more prepared for the events of the other trends that I talked about, certainly trend 1 and trend 2, is that the concept of privacy and security by design and by default is starting to take place. And so I'm seeing companies a lot younger that are idea stage, that are pre-POC, proof of concept, pre-revenue, coming in and building, needing to build, they're understanding that they're going to need that security and privacy, and thinking about it early. And that's so brilliant, because when you think about it early, it changes the whole paradigm of your business, and it actually changes your needs over time. It's really fascinating to see. So the first thing that happens when you implement this concept of security and privacy by design, and that is the trend, is that you start learning from the beginning, and you start incorporating the thoughts of security and privacy risks in decisions throughout the whole process. So you build it right into your product design process, and it's wonderful. So what happens is that you actually people are learning and people are catching things, and even if you're not following a specific framework or standard, you're preparing into business much more. So we see cybersecurity consultants, we've found it ourselves. You come into an organization, you realize the hard work is going to be this massive cultural shift, because everybody has access to everything, everybody does whatever they want, there's no documented anything ever, or you go and look at a code base and you're like, wow, there's 5 years of not great architecture here. These guys are going to have to stop working on features and spend the next six months fixing a lot of bad mistakes. And so when you think about when businesses go down and think about this earlier, and they start incorporating that into their design process, it's just a drastically different outcome. So that's the trend I'm seeing on the defensive side, is businesses starting earlier, people developing skills earlier in their business, and just incorporating the thoughts. And I've even seen companies go, you know what, let's not even do this. There's the risk is so high, and the market and the opportunity is not great. If there's option A, option B, option C, option A is just way too risky. Let's just go with option B because it'll be easier. So even at that decision phase of what feature you do next, having security, risk, and privacy factored in is just very empowering for a business. It can help them be more efficient and move more quickly.
Fantastic. So just a slight deviation for the normal man on the street. When he thinks about cybersecurity and what to do, typically what would come up would be one, antivirus, maybe firewall, things like that. So any easy, any open source tools, or any techniques, or any tools which would advise the SMB or even regular users to have it as at the bare minimum, right? More from a defensive perspective. So any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, my philosophy on securing small to medium-sized businesses, I don't start with thinking about tools. Does a business need a password manager? Do they need a single sign-on tool? Do they need a vulnerability scanner? Do they need an antivirus solution? Probably. Where I think organizations need to start is understanding their roles and responsibilities and understanding their risks. So I would start with risk management, even if it's very simple risk management system. But if you're not like the first thing, what are we even protecting? What are the concerns? What are the things that we're okay with versus what are the things that would not be acceptable? So that understanding at the ownership, leadership, board level of a small business is critical. I'm not a fan of starting off with tools. I think it's the wrong way to think about it. And I do see a lot of practitioners do that. Like, okay, let's start with antivirus and let's start with this. Like, it's, going in and checking boxes as though all boxes are created equally. But really, in a business context, you look at the business. What's important? Protect that, right? Like, I'd say, like, I would agree. I think we'd all agree. Like, yes, multi-factor authentication is great. Put multi-factor authentication on everything. But if it's gonna take you 3 weeks to get that done across your business, if you know what the most important things and where the biggest risks are in your businesses, maybe you can spend the first week putting it on those things. And that's why just everything, I put it through the context of, so start with a risk management program. And that's, I mean, I'm not on your podcast to sell my product, but that's what we do. That's why we do that. Because it's just completely illogical in my, in my way of thinking to just start picking off random problems. Like, understand your business. What is critical to your business? What are the negative outcomes? What are the threat trajectories? And a lot of the times those threat trajectories aren't all these malicious hackers we're talking about. I see more companies have data breaches because the developer launches crap code at the end of the day on Friday that wasn't properly tested, and there's not a great, so they fail at proper testing, they fail at proper, decision making around the deployment. They're stuck on that deadline. They deploy it, and then by Monday there's 20 people going like, "Hey, how come I can see all this data?" And it's like, "Oh, we just had a data breach. We just somebody could have went in and loaded other customers' data and download." Like, hopefully nobody did. Do they have some way of how well are they logging everything? But so that's really my thinking around this, is understand what you have and what is important, through CIA and now P, privacy, and look at your business and focus there. Because the other thing too is, if you're a technologist in a business and you're trying to go to senior management and trying to get them to give you money for things, if you start off just with things, you might find yourself buying 2 or 3 products, and then they're not going to want to give you any more money. But if you start by understanding, you can also likely get more money, because when you're able to articulate and work with a team, and the leadership can see the things that they're not willing to accept and understand the threats and the risks to that business, then you're going to have a real budget conversation. And that allows you to go, you might decide, hey, look, because of the way we're using our desktops, we might not be as concerned about antivirus in the first quarter because we have these 3 things here that are real serious risks. And we see this a lot in businesses, like Mac, an Apple Mac, a modern Mac that's being updated, has a built-in antivirus tool. Is it the best antivirus tool in the world? No. It doesn't have, it doesn't have the in-depth of anomaly detection and centralization. But if you had a web application with a lot of open vulnerabilities that's never had a penetration test, and your developers don't have security training, and you have 2 million records of healthcare data and none of those are on the desktops, I'd be focusing more of the money on fixing that problem, and maybe we'll table the AV for. But again, it's context, right? It's what is the state of affairs? What are the threats to the business? What's the business willing, once they understand those, to accept or not accept? What's the budget? What's the human resource? And build a plan versus just kind of picking off low-hanging fruit.
Got it. Thanks, Darren. This gives a great perspective, and thank you to listeners for tuning in. Do subscribe, share, and like this podcast. Consider giving it a 5-star rating if you like the content. Bye for now. Talk to you soon.